My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas. If you are actively involved in trying to make changes in CPS or in divorce laws or something along those lines, if you speak out in criticism of the church, often you are the one who gets pegged as either being an angry person or a bitter person, or you're just a bitter, angry person. And especially if you're a white male, a bitter, angry, white male, that is the sin of all sins. Somehow you're the problem. The system is not the problem. The laws are not the problem. The church is not the problem. You're the problem. And if you just were able to forgive everybody and not be angry, everything would be fine. And we could consider status quo, hunky-dory, and just continue to move on. So I wrote this letter. Is speaking out against abuse a sign of bitterness? So I'm just going to go ahead and read the letter as I wrote it. It has now been over 4 years since I have seen my grandchildren, Cruz and Gideon Morgan. Prior to that, I often babysat them several times a week. Over a 9-month span, I babysat or visited them over 80 times. They were at my house for hours, and I regularly visited them at my daughter's apartment. For weeks, I was their primary caretaker when their mother was working. At times, they practically lived with us. Even when it was difficult and tiring for me, I was so happy to be with them, as many people knew. My reward was to be with them. I supported my daughter and encouraged her in any way that I could, often when other family members appeared to have abandoned her. My grandchildren and I were very close. My younger grandson took his first steps walking to me. My older grandson used to wiggle out of whoever's arms he was in and come running to me whenever he saw me. Early in 2015, my daughter wrote to me saying that she hoped I would always be close to Cruz and Gideon. She said that I was good for them, and if I were close to them, they would turn out okay. It was the most treasured text message that I had ever received. On April 26, 2015, my daughter wrote me that I would never see my grandchildren again and that she would erase my memory from their lives. Ha ha ha, you have no grandkids. Her church knows about it, yet her church remains silent. What did I do to earn this hostility? My wife and I were the ones she called for help when Gideon had to be admitted to the hospital on April 21st or 22nd, 2015. My wife babysat Cruz for 2 days until I got home from working out of state, and I babysat him for the 2 days after that. After Gideon's release on Saturday, April 25th, Children's Protective Services, CPS, visited my daughter to investigate a charge of apparent or potential neglect or abuse or endangerment, apparently filed by someone at Children's Medical Center in Dallas, Texas. Now, I will take an aside right here. In the Pardo case that Senator Bob Hall has been writing about, Children's Protective Services and Children's Medical Center are the two main actors once again. Because I had warned my daughter about CPS and because she knew nothing about the way CPS works, she assumed that I had called CPS to have her investigated. I did no such thing. I made numerous phone calls and finally got in touch with the caseworker. After talking with me and my wife, she stopped her investigation because we, my wife and I, were such a strong support system for my grandchildren. However, she refused to tell my daughter that I had nothing to do with the report the agency had received. 18 months later, only because of my contact with a state senator, and for clarification from a different video, this was actually Senator Van Taylor. Senator Bob Hall was the first senator who responded to me. I've been in contact with many other senators and representatives since then, many of whom have been great, some of whom have completely ignored me. But Bob Hall was the first person who responded to me, so I should clarify that from yesterday's video. Anyway, Senator Van Taylor's office got involved. I finally received a letter from the stating that I had never contacted the agency. Yet by then, the damage was done. And CPS and the FPS never contacted my daughter. To make matters worse, my daughter filed a false criminal police against me, and she filed for a protective order against me. I believe she was coached in this by her mother, but I am not sure. Her mother had threatened me in the past, actually on multiple occasions in the past, and this appeared to be her opportunity to make good on a threat. As a result of these reports, Dallas Detective Quezada threatened to have me arrested if I did not report to his office. I had to return from Little Rock immediately. Even though he did not believe the report, He was trying to charge me with a felony. I was also served with a protective order by a Dallas constable. I worked for the government in a position of public trust, and the charges were so serious that my superior said I had no option but to defend myself in court or risk losing my job. Much more than my job was at stake. I could have faced prison time had the accusation stuck in court. I was rebuilding my life after a vicious and deceitful, no-fault divorce filed against me several years earlier. I was remarried over a year, and I could have lost my new marriage had my daughter been successful in her attempts. At the time, my insurance was the primary insurance covering my wife, kids, and stepsons, one of which has severe medical needs, and I and he could have lost that as well. I would have lost my retirement, pension, additional Social Security benefits, and a rental house that I have. I value those between $1.5 and $2 million. Not currently, but in the future. In short, my entire life and future could have been ruined because of false allegations and perjury. The hearing for the protective order took place in July 2015 and lasted 2 days. My wife and my daughter committed multiple instances of perjury that were easily proven. My daughter's boyfriend was such a nutcase that I think he helped me, especially when he had to plead guilty to abusing my daughter. He threatened to snap my daughter's neck shortly after the hearing. I found out afterwards that she also tried to recruit at least one other person to lie against me, but he refused to do so and said she was wrong for what she was doing and that I was a very good grandfather. The trial, or the hearing I should say, lasted 2 days, and at the end the judge found no evidence of guilt on my part. It is almost unheard of for a judge not to give a protective order against a man, yet she refused to do so. She placed an injunction on us, I believe, to protect me from my daughter's, quote, hatefulness. The hearing cost me over $15,000 to defend myself. I then had to face a criminal hearing, which was dismissed, but only after it cost me another $4,000. I had to take out a loan to finance the almost $20,000 I needed to defend myself. My wife has autoimmune diseases, and due to the stress of the situation, she experienced debilitating migraines for about a year. It also didn't help when she found out that I had slept in my car in a Planet Fitness parking lot in Little Rock to save money to pay off my debt. So because I was working in Little Rock, I used to stay in a hotel up there, cheap hotel, but in order to pay off my debt, I started sleeping in my car in a Planet Fitness parking lot. And that way I could take a shower in the morning before going to work. It was really great one day that the manager came out and says, I know what you're doing, and I got your back. And I said, so what do you mean exactly? She says, God told me that you were a good man and that I needed to get your back and I need to keep your back. Never met the lady before. I don't think that I remember calling. I don't recall meeting her afterwards. But I want to thank that lady, whoever she was. My daughter used to attend Watermark Church in the Porch with JP. Prior to the hearing, I contacted Watermark for help. It is against Scripture for a Christian to take another believer to court. She never became a member at Watermark, so for legal purposes, Watermark felt they couldn't help in this instance, which I understood. But I will tell you that Watermark, who did not know who I was, responded immediately. Within a couple of hours of my inquiry, there were several people contacting me via email, and I'm not sure via phone as well, but they immediately got involved. And I went to the church and spoke with them. They immediately got involved. For legal purposes, they could not do so, and I completely understood that. But I want to thank Watermark, because Watermark was the church that actually did what I thought they should have done or could have done. I requested help from another church that my daughter's mother had attended. I don't know if she still was, but Ridgeview Church in Rockwall, Texas. Pastor Matt Geisinger and I used to be friends, and I will basically now call him an acquaintance. Administrative pastor, executive pastor David Shepard wrote me a letter on behalf of him and the church, and on behalf of him and Matt Geisinger and the elder board, stating that if I came back to the church again, I could be arrested for trespassing. Ridgeview Church, Rockwall, Texas. Going for help, and then being threatened with being arrested if you come back again. Thank you, Ridgeview, for modeling Jesus Christ for me, for the world. About 15 months after this whole event took place, my daughter wrote to me and apologized in a very general sort of way. Maybe I should have responded differently, but I asked her what she was apologizing for, that she could have ruined my life. When I questioned her about her and her mother's perjury, she got offended and cut me off again. I found out she was attending a church in Dallas, and this would be Shoreline Community Church or Shoreline City Church, Shoreline Community Church, I believe, in Garland, Texas. So I went to the church and I left a note asking the pastor to contact me. Instead, I was contacted by someone else in the church, and on the second phone call, I was told that the church had an obligation to protect my daughter from me. In other words, they were accusing me of being abusive. I couldn't believe it. So I sent the person the transcript of the hearing, and he realized that my daughter had not been telling them the entire truth. Again, in this hearing, the judge found me innocent of all charges. Another member of the pastoral staff told me not to worry. The grandchildren were fine, my daughter was okay, etc. They were discipling my daughter, and they did not want her to leave the church as she had previously done with Watermark. The fact that I was her father and the boy's grandfather appeared to mean very little to them. I was told they were her family. The damage caused by my daughter reached beyond what took place between me and my grandchildren. My other daughter got involved and started accusing me of all sorts of things based on what my daughter had said. When I was finally able to tell her what really happened, everything changed. But between these fabrications and the divorce, I was neither informed of nor invited to either of my daughter's weddings. My ex-wife's new husband, a former pastor, gave them away. Former gymnast Rachel Denhollander's words are way too often true, not just about sexual abuse, but about abuse in general. Church is one of the least safe places to acknowledge abuse because the way it is counseled is, more often than not, damaging to the victim. There is an abhorrent lack of knowledge for the damage and devastation that sexual assault or any type of false allegations, false accusations, complete fabrications and lies, court cases, legal harassment. There is an abhorrent lack of knowledge for the damage and devastation these things bring. It is with deep regret that I say the church is one of the worst places to go for help. That's a hard thing to say because I am a very conservative evangelical, but that is the truth. There are very, very few who have ever found true help in the church. And I added after her quote, the counsel is especially damaging to the victim when the abuse is ongoing. Like Joseph in the Old Testament, I am trying to use the evil that has happened to me for God's purposes. Since 2013, I have been working on divorce reform to eliminate unilateral, no-fault divorce in Texas. And since about 2016, I have been working to help secure some kind of grandparent access rights. I do not believe speaking out against abuse is necessarily a sign of bitterness. I believe God has let these things happen to me so that I can be part of the change in Texas and in the U.S. For the last 4 years, my grandchildren and I have been and are being robbed of the relationship we had through malice and vindictiveness, hatred and deceit, and complacency and silence. And the complacency and silence, I would say, go to the church. I am speaking out loudly and seeking to make changes in multiple arenas so that others don't have to go through what I and my grandchildren have gone through. I would love to have the church assist me to reconnect with my grandchildren. Jeffrey S. Morgan. Once again, if you try to make any changes, one of the accusations that will be made against you is that you are angry, that you are bitter. Somehow you are the problem. The problem is not the problem is you. To some degree, you just need to develop a tough skin and keep speaking. For some people, no matter what you tell them, it's never going to be enough. You will always be permanently, perhaps, stigmatized, labeled and stigmatized as an angry, bitter person. But we are not fighting merely for ourselves. We are fighting for our children and our grandchildren. I am especially fighting for my grandchildren. I refuse to be eliminated from their memory. which is why I've left fingerprints all over the place, because I'm sure that at a later age in life, they will Google their names and they will find out they had a grandfather who loved them and was fighting with everything that he could to be in their lives. Whether that be through working with their mother, through other relatives, or through the church, which has been dreadfully and woefully silent, or through the state to try to change laws. I want my grandchildren to know that their grandfather loved them, cared for them, and never ever abandoned them, never ever forsook them, always had their everyday things about them. Thank you.